Welcome to Entrepreneurship and Small Towns. I'm Amanda Ninneman. My husband Jeremiah and I own and operate the Wired Rooster coffee shop in downtown Caledonia. I grew up in the Caledonia area, 8 miles south of town here in the Winnebago Valley, and I went to school in Caledonia, elementary and high school. After high school, I went to Luther College in Decorah, and after college, I ended up moving to New York City and worked in graphic design there for 4 years. And eventually I made my way back to the Midwest. I first lived in Elkader, Iowa, which is a tiny town of about 1,500 people in northeastern Iowa. And then I lived there for 2 years working in marketing and design. And then I moved to Minneapolis and worked as a freelance designer there. And that's where I met my husband, Jeremiah. Late in 2012, we saw a commercial building listed for sale in downtown Caledonia, and that listing that we saw is really what started the conversation about, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have that building, and if we did, what would we do with it? And that really got us thinking about potentially moving back to Caledonia and starting up a business in downtown and trying to really help revitalize the downtown area. We didn't end up buying that particular building, but we ended up looking at like 3 others before we bought the building that you see pictured here in early 2014. In the summer of 2014 is when we moved and started the demolition process. We ended up gutting the whole main floor. The business that had been in our building before us was Torgerson's Paint and Flooring, and so it was a very different business type. So we pretty much had to gut the entire space and rebuild it for a coffee shop. It was a long process. We'd ended up doing most of the work ourselves. My husband did a lot of the work himself, so it took a while. But we opened in on June 15th, 2015 was our first day open, and so that's been 5.5 years now that we've been in business. And besides the usual coffee, food, and ice cream options, we do afternoon classes and evening events a lot. What you're seeing in these photos are some, painting classes, some of the craft classes. We did adult story times. It was a regular evening event that we did. And then trivia nights we do every other Friday night. So we had a lot of fun with that. Obviously that's all pre-COVID. So what I'd like to talk about today is considering your hometown or another small town as an option to start your own business. When you're considering a small town, it's important to take a look at its assets and needs, and which is important for any business plan at all, but it's perhaps even more important in a small town than if you were opening up a business in a larger city. A business in a larger city is a little bit more about your own interests and passions and your desire to open that particular business. Because it generally has a better chance of being a viable business in a larger city just because you're drawing from a larger population. But because of its small size, small towns, you really need to make sure that it fulfills a need for the town or builds on assets that are already there in order to make sure that your business idea is going to be viable and will be around for long term in that town. So there are 5 basic things to consider when you're studying your town's assets and needs. And I'm going to walk you through those 5 steps here using our choosing to open up a coffee shop in Caledonia as an example as I go through each step here. So the first step is to take inventory of the current businesses that are already there. What businesses currently exist and how do those businesses serve the town? Are they geared toward providing basic essential services to their residents? Are they geared more toward tourism? Are they businesses that provide jobs, or do they attract new residences or add to the quality of life in that town? Knowing what they do for the town helps you figure out what is maybe missing in comparison. The time period that I'm going to show here for these examples is the year 2013, because it was January of that year that we really started looking at buildings and really studying the town to try to figure out what we were going to do. And then for the sake of simplifying it for this presentation, I've only focused on downtown Caledonia because that's ultimately where we want it to be, rather than the whole town, which would have been much more complicated. In actuality, though, when you're studying your town for a potential business, you will want to make sure to look at the whole town so that you're sure that you have the whole picture. But in 2013 in downtown Caledonia, there were 51 businesses total. And 31 of those, most of them, the majority of them were what I call appointment style businesses, which means that they're primarily offices. They're usually offering a type of a service rather than a product, and they generally require an appointment in order to go do business with them. There's a wide variety of different types of businesses, including financial advisors, realtors, lawyers, insurance agents. There's a dentist, a couple of chiropractors, pet groomer, the vet clinic was still downtown at the time, a barbershop and hair salon, a photography studio, the funeral home, and a couple of car repair places. They don't generally, these type of businesses don't generally get heavy foot traffic by design. I mean, they intend to not have a bunch of people in there at the same time. People come one at a time for their appointments, and not just walking when they happen to be in the area. They don't just walk in. These types of businesses are still really important for towns because they provide services for the residents. And then they also bring people to town for these specific reasons too. And that's just as important to getting people to town, because then once they're here, then they can also support the other businesses that are here. But they just, in comparison to the next type that I'm going to talk about, they just don't bring the heavy foot traffic that the other ones do. So then the other remaining 20 businesses are what I call walk-in style businesses, or businesses where they don't really need an appointment. You can just walk in on your own time to use those services or to purchase the items. Those 20 businesses that were in Caledonia and downtown at the time, 2013, were 3 different restaurants, although 2 of those had limited hours. Either were only open for lunch or for more sporadic days. There were 2 banks, the post office, a print shop, a gym, and then 10 different retail businesses, including our bakery. There was a technology shop, a floral shop, the paint and flooring store, the liquor store, and then 5 different gift or antique shop type businesses. Although, again, 2 of those 5 gift shops also had limited hours, were only open a few days a week or half days too. So there is our list of current businesses. Obviously, it's helpful to know what's already there so that you're not doubling up on your new business idea. And then it will also help you discover some voids that could be filled. So the next thing to think about is, where are these businesses located? Are they downtown or on the highway? Are they, and then are they easily accessible by car or by foot? Does that even matter really? Or are they near businesses or amenities that helps kind of create a bustling town vibe? Because it's worth knowing where these businesses are located and how it affects the town. That way it'll help identify any further needs or something that works or doesn't work. And that's all information that you can then apply to your own business plan. So here I've kind of mapped out where I've simplified it just to show the 20 walk-in style businesses. Keep in mind though, while we look at this, that the other 31 appointment style businesses are interspersed in between what's shown here, so, along with some empty storefronts. So it's not completely dead where there isn't a business or a building shown there. But these are the businesses, these 20 businesses are the ones that bring the heaviest foot traffic. So you can see that, there's a nice little strip of retail businesses on Kingston Street that creates a nice little bustle on that street there. Main Street, in contrast, is a little bit less filled out. It's a lot more sparse. It's about like one heavy foot traffic business each block. So it feels a lot quieter and does not feel as bustling and alive as that section of Kingston did at the time. So, depending on what type of business that you're considering, maybe it would be better to try to get a location that would be near the other, on Kingston Street next to the others that already have heavy foot traffic. Or maybe you might decide to open up on Main Street to try to grow more foot traffic there in that area and to help the other businesses that are currently there. So that's all considerations you should take into account. The third thing to look at is what other assets does the town have that aren't business related? What other things does the town have working for it? Are there natural assets like a river or parkland? Are there historical buildings, or maybe even just simply available property is a big asset that for any person wanting to open up a business. So for downtown Caledonia in 2013, these are the non-business assets that we had identified. The historic downtown, Caledonia is lucky to have a lot of historic buildings, and there's a district that's in fact listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. So that's definitely an asset. So you could potentially build a business that either utilizes one of the buildings or builds off of that history in some way. The county courthouse, where Caledonia is the county seat, so there's a large number of employees that work at the courthouse and the county buildings right downtown on the weekdays. So you could potentially build a business that either maybe offers a lunch option for those workers, or something that they could shop for or do before or after work. Cultural designations, Caledonia is the heart of quilt country and wild turkey capital of Minnesota. You could potentially do a business that's related to any of those designations, maybe a tour guide company that takes people to see the barn quilts or some wild turkey areas. Caledonia also has strong school and sports programs. You could potentially think about a business related to the students' needs, maybe a company that makes school affiliated clothing and accessories. And then also its proximity to Beaver Creek Valley State Park is an asset. Something related to that you could do as a business that is something to do with outdoor recreation that would take advantage of the park being so close. So this list that you create of non-business assets will also help you generate possible business ideas. So step number 4, after you've made your list of current businesses and current assets, then you can try to figure out what's missing and where there might be opportunities for a new business. So step 4 here is, does the town have needs that aren't currently being met? Are there any basic essential services that are missing for the residents? Does the town need more tourism? Does the community need more jobs? Or how is the community's quality of life in general? Just think about what might be missing. One thing that we knew in 2013 was that its downtown was really struggling, and that they had recently lost 5 retail businesses over the last 2 years prior. They lost a couple businesses in 2011 and 2012 each, and then a restaurant, the China Buffet, closed in 2013 as well. So that was a particular, there were a lot of holes in downtown because of that reason here. And I've got that mapped out in this map here where those 5 businesses were located, and 4 of them were on Main Street here, which helps explain why it was so quiet in comparison to Kingston. So there were pretty big holes that they lost and that they hadn't filled yet. And since they were all retail businesses, it really had a big impact on foot traffic and how the downtown really felt, with whether it felt like there was anything happening anymore. And people really noticed it. It was pretty noticeable. So the needs that we had identified for Caledonia back in 2013 were that they needed more food options. They needed more nightlife options. There were 3 bars, but there weren't any other options besides going to the bar. So giving people other options of things to do in the evenings, needing more foot traffic to help support the other businesses that were already there, and then a need for somewhere for the residents to just spend extended time outside of their home. There wasn't really somewhere that they could just hang out and feel comfortable in, aside from the library. That was pretty much the only place, or sitting outside in the parks, but that's kind of hard to do sometimes in the dead of winter, like it is now. And then also, it seemed like Caledonia could use another an increase of the number of businesses that would be attractive to tourists and outside people from out of town. The bakery has been a long-standing business that is regionally known for being in Caledonia and for being a great bakery. That's one thing that brings people from out of town. The farmhouse restaurant, they have got really strong following in La Crosse, and even in the cities area, they have people that drive all the way down here to eat at the farmhouse. So it seemed like Caledonia could use a couple more businesses like that would bring people from outside of the area to come and visit and spend their money. And then Caledonia could also use something a business that would encourage more revitalization as well, so that it wouldn't just be one more business, but it would help lay the foundation for more businesses to also feel comfortable to open up as well. All right, so now that we've got a list of assets and then a list of needs, then we can start brainstorming a list of business ideas that fits any one or combination of those things. From that larger list of business ideas, then work through them and match them against your own interests and skills to find a perfect business idea that would fit. So what businesses, brainstorm business ideas that fulfill any of those needs or builds off of an assets, and then make sure it makes sense with your own skills and interests. So for our particular case, the coffee shop ended up being the best fit for both Caledonia and for Jeremiah and I. We settled on coffee shop because it gave slightly different food options for the downtown area for both lunch and dinner. It gave more nightlife options. We could offer some more evening events that would be in a different atmosphere than just a bar. As a retail business, it definitely encouraged more foot traffic, and it also supported current businesses, not just by improving foot traffic for them as well, but also working well with appointment-based businesses so that people had somewhere to hang out in between appointments or while waiting for their car repair or their pet to be groomed, etc. It also provided options for people to comfortably spend a few hours downtown without feeling pressured to buy a whole meal or needing an appointment. And then it helps build the foundation for people getting comfortable in being downtown again, getting them out of their cars and feeling like they've got a reason to come and hang out. Once they're here, and they're comfortable spending time in here, then they're more likely to come back and more likely to support the other businesses. And it fit well, the coffee shop fit well with our individual skills. My husband Jeremiah is a foodie. He loves coming up with new ideas in relation with food. When we lived in Minneapolis, he was a buyer for Whole Foods Market, so he had extensive experience with buying inventory to support retail businesses. And he had a lot of connections with food vendors as well. My own marketing and design background suited really well with marketing a coffee shop, and I also had worked in a coffee shop for a year when I lived in New York City, so I understood how to make drinks and run a coffee shop. And then the last piece for us was Jeremiah's best friend. He owns a coffee shop in Minneapolis, so we had a great resource for advice and information there. So in the end, it turned out to be a really good fit for both the town and us. So to just give a recap, if you're thinking about wanting to own your own business one day, or you maybe want to start one right away in your career, consider doing it in your hometown or another small town. There's a good chance that you'll find a good fit that will benefit you and your town. So I'll just go through each step really quickly again here to recap. 1, take inventory of the current businesses. Create a list of all the businesses your town currently has. Especially if this is your hometown, you might actually be surprised at how much is already there that you aren't normally aware of in your day-to-day life. 2, where are those businesses located? Take note of their locations and how that affects the town and its residents and visitors. Number 3, list non-business assets that the town has that you could potentially build off of. 4, come up with a list of the needs the town has in order to identify any voids that a new business could fill, and therefore ensure viable success. And 5, brainstorm businesses that either then fill a need or builds on an asset or both, and then figure out from that list which ones would be a great fit for you, considering your own skills, interests, and resources. The last thing I'd like to note is that there are a number of benefits associated with choosing to open a business in a small town versus a larger city. It's a common perception that it's harder to open a business in a small town, and sometimes it is in a lot of ways. It definitely requires a different approach than opening a business in a larger city, but there are many perks as well. One of the main things is your loyal customer base, whether you're actually directly selling to or working with your local residents as your customers, or if you are primarily selling to the outside area, but you might have local employees, you'll have a really loyal following in a small town. Small towns are very incredibly proud of their local businesses and their all of their local assets. And that's definitely a strength for when you need support from your community. Low overhead costs are a big one. There's a lot more reasonable real estate available in small towns, and even just the cost of living itself is much lower. So that's a really big consideration when you're thinking of trying to keep your costs manageable as starting a new business. You're also likely to have an easier time working with your city or any local EDA or any other local institution that you might need for startup help. Small towns are generally really excited about new projects and will do everything they can to make it easy for you to start your business because they really want you there. And then there's also likely less competition for whatever business that you're starting. You're likely not having a lot of, in a larger city, you might be competing against 50 other businesses of the same type, but in a small town, if you're not the only one, there's only a couple others like you, so your competition is much less fierce. And then the final point is that it's really fulfilling to be able to see the direct contributions to your community is a great thing. It becomes less about what the business is doing for you and more about how it's contributing to the community itself, which is always a great thing to help you through some of the harder times. In business, there are always hard times. And so when you're despairing, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? And when you can look and see how it's helping your community, it makes it a lot easier to get through those hard times. And that's really it. I would open it up for questions now. Thank you.
That's awesome. I have a question.
Yes.
How do you see the benefits to your community? Like what visual, like how do you know? I mean, yeah, what are your clues?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. If it's a retail business like ours is, it's really, you can see the improved foot traffic and the ways that your town is showing up to support your downtown area. So that's a really immediate one. But in talking with your community and your other fellow business owners, I mean, people make it really clear when they like what you're doing and when they support you in it. it becomes a whole conversation between you and them. It's not you're not in a bubble by any means. And you know, like for us in particular, you know, we're a coffee shop, and so it's easy for people of all walks of life to come in and make themselves at home in our shop, and that's really what it's all about. And so, you know, in particular, I think about you know, individual customers who maybe don't have another place to go, or and this becomes their second home. You know, it's really easy for us to feel good about being here when we see people treating us like their home. So, but yeah, it's you know, being able to employ your local community is always a big plus, and people are always grateful for that. And so for each business type, I would think there's a lot of ways to see your impact.
How long did it take for you to see your impact?
I guess that's a good question. I guess I'm not really sure. Pretty much right away. I mean, because in our particular case, the downtown, the Main Street stretch was so quiet, in compared to what it had been just a few years prior. It was a pretty immediate effect when we opened up. To have one, at least just one more retail business on Main Street was a pretty immediate effect in terms of foot traffic and stuff. But in terms of you know, realizing the effect on the community members, you know, that takes a little bit longer. You know, you have to get people feel comfortable to be regulars and stuff. And then once you realize how, you know, how much you've already been ingrained in their daily lives, you know, that's always a big thing.